Mitch Cohen, you're on.
Thank you, Ralph. Great to be here. Ralph's given me about 3 minutes to tell my entire life story, so I'll try to do it in 15 to 20. Hopefully that's okay and I won't get in too big trouble. So our company is the Daniels Corporation. We're a private sector company, but we think a little bit differently than many other corporations, especially other corporations in our industry. We really look at our company as a platform for progressive social change. I mean, it's as simple as that. That's what we talk about at the office. We talk about how can we as a company leverage our power as a private sector company to build healthy communities, to build strong communities.
Don't you think about just the bottom line?
We don't. Funny you should ask, but no, actually it's about way more than the bottom line. I mean, what we've always found, Ralph, is that if we do the right thing, the bottom line will be there. So everyone talks about triple bottom line, quadruple bottom line. We try to live that every day. And we've done that for now 34 years since I joined John Daniels as a partner in the Daniels Corporation in 1984. So right now you may have heard of some of the sort of big shiny things, shiny objects, things that we've done in the past number of years. Many of you may have been to TIF Bell Lightbox. Have you? Anybody been into the Lightbox? Pretty much yes. TIF Bell Lightbox is an example of how a private sector company and the nonprofit sector can come together, form a partnership, and really truly create magic. And we did that in the entertainment district in partnership with a filmmaker named Ivan Reitman, who owned the piece of land, and TIF, the Toronto International Film Festival Group. And I think we really proved with TIF that a public-private partnership can create enormous value, not only for us as a developer, bottom line, which it did, but for a neighborhood in a city, for a region, for a province. And certainly TIF is bringing value to our country every single day. I know when I walk into that building, I go into TIF Bell Lightbox, particularly during TIF, during the film festival, I walk in the front door and it's jammed, rammed with people, and I think, how did this happen? It happened by partnership. And everything that we're doing is all based on partnership, in bringing people together. So TIF Bell Lightbox is one example, but the work that we've been doing in Regent Park for the last 11 years is another really important example of public-private partnerships. Now, when we were looking at what was happening in Regent Park back in 2005, the City of Toronto was looking for a development partner. They went out to the development community with a request for proposals and said, who wants to partner with us? But more importantly, who's going to buy the density from us in order to build market condominium units? So we looked at this proposal call that was looking for a purchase price. And we looked at it and we said, you know what? Regent Park is a highly stigmatized, highly challenged neighborhood. And how are we going to put a price on what this density is worth? So we answered the proposal call by saying, you know what, City of Toronto? Your density is worth nothing. In fact, your density is worth less than nothing because all of the land in Regent Park was contaminated because it had been the old cabbage town in 1940s and up to 48. When it was demolished, it was just, rubble, and it was built, the Regent Park that you knew about over many decades was just built on rubble. So we knew that the land was severely contaminated. So we said, your land is worth nothing. We're not going to buy it for anything. We're not going to pay a penny. And guess what? We didn't win the proposal call. We lost. Someone else offered a whole bunch of money to the city. But within a couple of months, that agreement fell apart. And we were offered the opportunity a second time, along with 3 other developers. That second time around, the city said, how much will you pay for the land? Or you can provide an alternative development framework. They opened the door for our public-private partnership. That was in 2006. They agreed, in fact, that the best way for us to create value in Regent Park was by virtue of a partnership, by doing it together, hand in hand. Such a complex piece of work, replacing 2,083 rent-geared-to-income housing units that were completely dilapidated, run down, could not be renovated or repaired. How do you do that? What do you do with the families? Where do they move? How do you create value? How do you sell condominiums? How do you bring in a bank or a grocery store into a neighborhood that no bank or grocery store had been in for 50 years? you do it in partnership. So the city accepted the partnership in 2006. It's 11 years later, going on 12 years later. And we're now 2/3 of the way through the Regent Park revitalization. Hopefully some of you have been there to Daniel's Spectrum, an arts and culture center, the aquatic center. There's a brand new community center. In fact, there's actually now a park in the center of Regent Park. There never was a park. It was called Regent Park, but there was no park in Regent Park. So how did we do this? We did it again in partnership. When we went out to the commercial sector, we needed to have a bank in Regent Park. So we went out to all the banks and we said, who wants to plant their flag in this community side by side with us? And yes, it's pioneering, but who's going to play a role in city building with us? And guess what? All of the banks said, pick me, pick me. But the Royal Bank, RBC, said, we're going to come in, we're going to be your partner, we're going to open a branch, but we're also going to do what you've asked us to do, Mitchell. They said, we're going to start hiring locally immediately. Before the branch was built, 2 years before there was a branch in Regent Park, they started hiring, because the entire revitalization of Regent Park is based on local capacity building, building capacity, building value for the residents of Regent Park so that it actually is a positive outcome for people from this community. There's been lots of ups and downs over the last 11 years. Ralph has seen it and watched it as Rob Ford was elected, and about 3 weeks into his tenure as the mayor, decided he was going to shut it down because he didn't think that Regent Park revitalization was a good thing. So we had to fight against that. We had to fight against the fact that the mayor looked at it as gravy train. He looked at it as spending public money for no good reason. But ultimately, we were able to win that war. We were able to continue, carry on, and continue to do this transformation that today is truly looked on around the world as the gold sort of standard of how you go about transforming a challenged inner city neighborhood into a very vibrant, healthy neighborhood. That's underway, it's happening, and it's an important part of the work that we do. Now, where did all this come from? Very quick story on my background, and then we will open for questions. How is it that we as a company are doing what we do? Looking for partnerships, creating value through collaboration. Well, really it started with my background in Montreal when I was a community development worker for the YMCA. I was doing this work in a very rundown neighborhood in Montreal when the landlord decided he was going to demolish all of the buildings that these tenants were in. This was vintage 3-story brick buildings, just like Regent Park. They were built after the war. They were run down. And this was 1973, and it was moments after the federal government introduced a national housing policy that supported community groups, tenants groups, to come together, to mobilize, to form nonprofit co-ops. So I worked with this group. They formed a nonprofit co-op. I was their instigator, agitator, shit disturber. We went to City Hall, and we said, City Hall, do not give this landlord his demolition permit to demolish these homes, because the vacancy rate in Montreal at that moment in time was less than 1%. There was nowhere for these tenants to go. There was no other housing, particularly no affordable housing. So we fought and we won. A housing co-op was created there with federal government support, and now 40-some years later, the co-op is still there. Many of the original people that organized that, they were taking their destiny into their own hands, organizing themselves, organizing their families, and becoming masters of their own community. They became their own landlord through a nonprofit co-op. But I'll never forget the moment they came running into my office with their eviction notices, saying, oh my God, we have 30 days to get out. They were on month-to-month leases. And the fear and the anxiety, and it was awful. And at that moment, I realized that I had a role to play, and that every one of us has a role to play, that we can respond, that we can be creative, we can work to help create opportunities for people. And I was able to help this group form a co-op, grab hold of their destiny, and that has really been what has informed my work over the next 30, 40 years. I worked my way out of that job as a community development worker. I played music in Montreal for a number of years in a 3-piece jazz band and a 6-piece R&B band. And then my wife and I moved to Toronto in 1979, got a job for Co-op Housing with Co-op Housing Federation of Toronto, built nonprofit housing from 1979 to 1984. 1984, Brian Mulrooney terminates all social housing programs, and I'm out of a job. I had nothing to do. That's when I became fortunate to hook up with John Daniels. Last story here, Ralph, and then we'll open, okay? I had this opportunity to team up with this gentleman named John Daniels, who had just left Cadillac Fairview Development Corporation to form a new company called the Daniels Group. And I sat down with Jack at our meeting when I was introducing myself as an opportunity that I could run his new company. And we sorted through all the details, and each of us had a condition. And my condition was, if we ever have an opportunity to build social housing, to build affordable housing, to make a positive impact on communities, I want to be able to do that. And Jack said, absolutely. If there's a social housing program at whatever level, if there's anything that we as a private sector company can do, go ahead and do it. And then he said, and here's my condition. I'm going to buy you 5 suits, because he didn't like what I was wearing. So that was the nature of our agreement. I mean, I wore a suit for about a week or two, and then I stopped wearing the suits. But he was very, very true to his word. We've built social housing whenever there were social housing programs. We have used our company to be this platform for what I said at the outset, progressive social change. That's how we think, that's what we do. That's how we talk to all of our team members about what we do. How do we think beyond the box? There is no box. How do we be different? How do we be leaders? How do we demonstrate to our industry that there's more than one bottom line? And I think that's the basis of what we do. And if, you know, all of you, when you go out into the world, think about that yourselves, and whatever you do, there is more than one bottom line. It's how do you affect that? You do it through collaboration and partnership. Ralph, did I do that quick enough?
That was good, that's good. Now, you are unlike any of the real estate developers that I know. That's why I brought you in, and they're smiling, they like what you said. Let me ask you, what percent of Daniels Corporation today is doing social housing today?
Well, unfortunately, there is no national housing program.
So what percent of your company?
Probably right now 25%, and that's the Regent Park, because Regent Park is a very special sort of development in that it is a partnership with the City of Toronto and their social housing arm called Toronto Community Housing. However, there will soon be a national housing policy. The federal government is beginning to bring money down and to send money down to the provinces. So we actually entered an agreement with Peel, the region of Peel, about a month ago to build 174 units for the region of Peel. Where? City Centre, Mississauga. Not out in the boonies of Mississauga, but right at City Centre, right beside City Hall, because people of all walks of life and all income levels should have an opportunity to live in the city centre. That's why we've been such a strong proponent of inclusionary zoning. The need to have affordable housing in the City of Toronto and in all of the cities. And this is something the province of Ontario finally is moving towards. Development industry is dead set against it, saying don't apply more regulations, don't tell us that we have to build affordable housing. We've been promoting this for decades, and now it's finally happening. People need to live in the city and have affordable opportunities in the city for our city to be economically strong, for our city to be progressive and creative, and really compete on the international world.
I got a question, then I'm going to get the real question because they're smarter than me. If you had 2 projects, a social housing project, there's this new money coming from the feds, and it's good, and you got people in the inner city, and your company has X amount of resources, so you can't do every single deal you see. And there's another deal that's a total, one of your private sectors, one of the 75% like you're doing. You're building a tall building, got a great development near where I live, just south of St. Lawrence Market, spectacular.
The waterfront, Daniels Waterfront.
Spectacular. But
City of the Arts.
There's no social housing in that. But if you had 2 deals, and the no social housing one was spectacular. You know, your bottom line spectacular. The social housing one, you're going to feel good, but you're only going to make some money. Are you telling me you would say, I'm going to do that social housing one? And do you have shareholders? You're a private company. Is it just you and Jack? I mean, if it was a public company, and you came to me and I was on the board with those two deals, I'd say, I'm doing the one that's making more money. I don't want to like feel good.
Aren't I happy that we're a private company?
Okay. So you're telling me you would do the less profitable deal?
Hold on. I'm not saying that. I'm
Okay.
saying we would find a way to do both. Yes, we have
You
limited.
can't. You can't. You got say you got limited resources. You can only do one of the two.
No. There's always an outside the box. There's always a way. The way we manage ourselves is we grow to fit the program.
This guy's like Kathleen Wynne. No answer here.
No, I'm giving you an answer, but I want to add to the answer.
Okay.
We would absolutely find a way to do that social housing project. We have the team that can do it. We can add to that team. There is no end of amazing young people like in this room that would want to come and work with us and learn how to do social housing. And we'll find a desk somewhere in our office to do that. But I want to mention one other thing. You talk about what we're doing at the waterfront. Yes, we're making a lot of money on that project. It's hugely successful. The bottom line is amazing. But also, built into that project, built into the fabric of that project, is a whole bunch of nonprofit organizations that we have sold to at 50% of market value. So Artscape is one, the Remix Project, Manifesto. There's another one that we just signed the agreement on yesterday that I can't announce who they are because they'd kill me, but it's an entertainment group that have formed a nonprofit to create an incubator, an accelerator for artists. So in other words, yes, we're blending private sector and a bottom line with the overall look at a pro forma to say, we're going to do really well. We're going to sell these condominiums. We're going to sell these offices. Let's build into that pro forma the ability to do some work with some nonprofit organizations. And you know what? That adds to the bottom line. Because now we have a bigger story to tell. Now we're talking about the City of the Arts. It's the City of the Arts because we've incorporated all these nonprofits by selling to them at 50% of market, which allowed us to sell the condominiums at a much higher price. TIF Bell Lightbox is the best example. We donated $22 million to TIF to kickstart their fundraising campaign.
Which I was the co-chairman of.
Which you were part of from minute one. And you know, we came in there with $22 million, the Reitman family and Daniels, $22 million donation. That kickstarted it. But that also allowed us to sell the condominiums at Festival Tower up above the Lightbox at $100 a square foot above anybody else in the neighborhood. That combination of public-private, that value creation proposition is what we think about. So we're not going to throw away the nonprofit for only the profit. We're going to find a way to do both.
And you would. I mean, I truly believe he's the only guy I believe that would do it. If I was sitting in his chair running down, I wouldn't do it. I'd say I'd take the money on that deal, but he's a better man than me. Chris Suk, question on social procurement. Where's Chris?
Right here. All right, Mitchell, thank you for coming. And this answer, or you've kind of already answered this question a little bit, but in an article you submitted to the Globe and Mail, you spoke about the need for people and corporations to climb aboard the social procurement train. You talk about how the best and brightest are looking for ways to walk the walk and are looking for more than just a paycheck. So as we had last week, we had a venture capitalist that this wasn't necessarily the case for him. And obviously a lot more people are concerned with the bottom line of their projects and want to make sure that they get as high a profit as possible. So what strategies would you use to convince someone like that social procurement is the way to go?
Well, for us it's simple, and it's really having an opportunity to take that person, the venture capitalist, and walk with us. Walk with me through Regent Park. Spend 2 hours, and I will demonstrate the value of making business decisions that will be good for business and good for the community at the same time. And some of those decisions are really simple. Social procurement is a really simple concept. It's all about how do we spend the money we're going to spend anyway. You know, the Regent Park revitalization, when it's done, is a $2 billion project. That's a lot of money. So if we're thoughtful about how we spend that money, and I believe we can demonstrate and have demonstrated to many corporations, bringing them to Regent Park, introducing them to, I'll give you an example, Sakina. Sakina and her sewing circle. Sakina is a woman from Bangladesh that I met walking down the street in Regent Park, and I said, hello, my name's Mitchell Cohen, I'm with Daniels. Tell me about your experience with the revitalization. Sakina says, my hands are sad. Mr. Cohen, my hands are sad. Sakina, what are you talking about? What do you mean your hands are sad? No, Mr. Cohen. Back home in Bangladesh, I would do sewing and I would do quilting and I would use what I make as barter. I would trade it for food, for chickens, for anything. And now here in Toronto, in Regent Park, I have no ability to do that. Little light switch goes on. We're buying art for every single building that we're building in Regent Park and everywhere else, all the buildings. We buy art. How do we do it? How had we been doing it? Thoughtlessly. How can we do it? Thoughtfully. So we have interior designers that we hire and they go out, we give them a budget, here's whatever, a couple $100,000, go decorate our new condo buildings. Now, go do it intentionally. Commission a quilt. We commissioned a quilt that day with Sakina. And that $5,000 commission was the first of 10 commissions we've given to Sakina and her sewing circle, including 800 tote bags that we bought from Sakina to give as gifts, because we always give gifts to our homeowners and our tenants when they move in. How do we be thoughtful about it? I mean, walking the street and meeting people and demonstrating to that venture capitalist how thinking a little bit differently can have such an enormous impact. That's what it takes. It's not ivory tower stuff, it's on the street stuff. It's really showing people, introducing people, seeing the impact physically in a family. That's what needs to happen.
We should have put them together with, you're right, John Albright, the venture capitalist, manages 400 mil, who said last week, you interested in social impact investing? No. And I would say the same thing. I mean, I'm going to ask Sather a question. You're an executive. Get him a microphone with Madison Square Garden.
Let me ask you a question. Could you do this without provincial money or federal money when you first got started?
Absolutely. I mean, when we first got started, the very first projects that I did when I joined John Daniels, in 1984, were pieces of land in Mississauga that he bought. And he brought to my table, he bought it from this company called Aaron Mills Development Corporation. He bought the land, he brings them to my table, and he says, Mitchell, good luck, fill your boots, do whatever you want to do with them. And I looked at these pieces of land and I said, okay, we have an opportunity to build a company and build a company differently. And Jack has given me the runway to do that. So we looked at the very first piece of land and said, okay, we're going to build 82 townhomes. This was 1984. We're going to build them to an energy performance standard called R2000, the equivalent of what LEED or LEED Gold is today. So in other words, we look for an opportunity to, without provincial money, without government support, to build a better building, to build a better home for people where their energy bills would be less by virtue of the money we put in up front. So in other words, not at all everything that we do is based on government money. A lot of it is based on collaboration and partnership. I'll give you an example, maybe a little bit related to what you do. And this goes back to Regent Park. When we're in Regent Park, we're doing this development. We're hearing from the people in Regent Park, we need active athletic opportunity for our kids. And the Regent Park plan had no soccer pitch. It had no basketball court. It had an old ice rink on Shooter near River that actually the ice making equipment didn't work. So I went to Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. I went to MLSE, to their foundation, and I said, guys, how about an opportunity to think a little bit differently about corporate social responsibility? I'd known what MLSE had been doing for years. They were doing check writing, philanthropy. And I'm not putting it down, I'm saying there are other opportunities. They would write a check for $20,000 and they would refurbish a basketball court in a community, and that's great. But what I was putting on their table was an opportunity for a long-term partnership with a community. So I went to MLSE, and at first they looked at me strangely and said no. I went back a year later when there was some new leadership, and they still said no. I went back a third time when Bruce Kidd was the chair of their board, and they had a whole new management group there. And they said yes. They said, let's talk. What does it mean? So ultimately, what MLSE did was not just write a check. They did write a check, $3 million, to create the Regent Park Athletic Grounds. And whenever you're driving along Shooter near River, take a look at this magnificent athletic grounds that they built in partnership with us, in partnership with the City of Toronto. It has a soccer pitch, but the soccer pitch converts to cricket because cricket is the game of choice of people in Regent Park. They built the basketball court. They refurbished the ice rink. But here's the kicker. They have now a partnership with a social service agency called Dixon Hall, where each one of the teams, Toronto FC, Toronto Maple Leafs, and Toronto Raptors, send players to Regent Park every year to become mentors of kids in this community. So in other words, they are more than walking the walk of writing a check. They're walking that walk on a 10-year contract basis or some relationship basis to build capacity in this community. So where do you find partners? In all kinds of places. So Madison Square Gardens, I bet there's many, many opportunities for that company to look for partnerships in community in your neighborhood.
So we're going to go to another question here.
I got one more question.
We got
Follow
another
up.
question. Oh, yeah. A guy shows up in New York, wants to take over the class here.
Follow
That's all
up.
right.
Well, you said that your development was in partnership with the community, and you turned it over to the community to run it. Now, there was some social programs in Chicago and St. Louis. They built huge, large buildings that were filled with people that didn't have a lot of money.
Yeah.
Those buildings since have been demolished because there was no sweat in the work.
Mm-hmm.
They were destroyed. They've torn them down over the years and redone them. Now, how do you control that in your developments?
Well, again, Regent Park, I think, is a good example because this is where, in the last 11 years, we've been rebuilding social housing. And the question is really a good one because there are so many examples where buildings are built that are 100% rent geared to income. So in other words, where it is 100% unidimensional in terms of the income level of people in that building or that neighborhood, that is not a positive, healthy environment. So what has been happening in Regent Park and what we've been doing all of our careers is building mixed income communities where there would be some people in the buildings where they are paying rent geared to income, but there's others that are just simply paying an affordable rent and others that are paying market rent. So there's a range of incomes within a building. Now, what we're also doing in Regent Park is creating opportunities for people paying market rent to become homeowners, because we believe that homeownership is the best way to have skin in the game, to actually have, pride of community because it's your home, you're building equity. So we create these pathways to homeownership, which is really an antidote to exactly what you're talking about. Ownership, pride of community, pride of building, and it has to do with creating mixed income communities, communities where people do care about their building, their landscape around the building, and being part of a broader neighborhood.
Hi, Mr. Cohen. In an opinion article, as my friend Chris said, that you wrote in the Globe and Mail and you talked about social procurement to help local communities. My question is there a way that, that it's a common knowledge that number of women at senior and board level in corporate sector in Canada is very less? And how do you suggest that the government and other big corporations can use this social procurement to promote greater women inclusion? Can a policy which focuses on favoring companies led by women for government contracts would be useful in achieving that goal?
In this, I'm certainly no expert. I mean, we are always looking for opportunities for all of our team members, women and men, to grow. We look for ways to support women's initiatives and women's groups. In Regent Park, for a number of years, we've had a wonderful women's group that we have supported. So I think what we do is mostly listen to opportunities that come to us and nurture those opportunities in the best way we can. One of the things that we're doing right now is a musical production in Regent Park where we are particularly focusing on finding young women from the Muslim community to come and try out to be singers, dancers, performers, spoken word artists in this musical that we're doing called The Journey. The Journey, a living history of the Regent Park revitalization, is something I wrote a number of years ago. I mentioned earlier, I think I'm a songwriter, musician. So I wrote a musical, and we're very much focusing in what we do there on finding young women to really do something that, particularly in the Muslim community, is not so well appreciated by parents, which is to come out and be on stage and to express themselves. The story that we're having in this particular iteration of the living history is about a Muslim family where the mom and dad are saying, no, you shall not participate and go out and do spoken word. We're trying to express women's stories and stories of family and stories of community that we are seeing on the ground every day with the people that we meet. So I don't know if that goes far where you're going. I mean, we're not involved with other corporations in terms of finding ways to, build more pathways for women. It's not something that we are, actively involved in. We have women partners in our company. We continue to, bring in new women into our partnership.
Hey, Mitchell.
Hey.
I looked on your website under Giving Back, and I saw your Give a Gift, Get a Song charity campaign.
Yeah.
It states yourself and Tom Dutton have written and recorded songs to raise money and heighten awareness for the Artscape Foundation, Second Harvest, Habitat Humanity, among others. Grandma's on a Mission was a super catchy song.
Yeah.
I enjoyed listening to it. And I think it's awesome that you guys wrote a play about Regent Park revitalization. My question is, does embedding corporate social responsibility initiatives like these within your company culture enable your business to more easily obtain a social license to operate through the building of trust within the community?
Easy answer, 100%. I mean, I think I've talked a fair bit about this already, but just to add an exclamation mark, there's no question that what we've done over the last 34 years is built a brand that people do recognize is somewhat different. I mean, Ralph is saying it. I don't say it that much except in occasions like this, but our brand is different. We have a brand that people recognize that arts and culture is really part of the brand, and it always has been for decades now. I mean, what you're talking about in terms of the musical is really the most recent sort of extrapolation of that. This Saturday at the Regent Park Film Festival, there's a documentary about the revitalization that features, that it's all based on when we did the Journey production a year ago. A documentary filmmaker came and filmed the kids who are in this production and allowing the kids to tell their story about their experience in Regent Park. So what we're doing is we're storytellers. We're telling stories. We're using our brand and our company to be able to take stories from the neighborhoods that we work in and project them out to the world. And we know that that adds value to what we do. So from a business bottom line, it's good. From a community benefits point of view, it's very good.
Hi, Mitchell.
Hey.
So my question to you is about Toronto's housing affordability. So Toronto's housing affordability crisis has been a hot topic in the news lately. If interest rates continue to rise, people's loan eligibility is expected to sharply decline. Subsequently, market prices would be expected to fall. Now, what many consumers don't realize is that market forces also affect developers. So rising interest rates increase the cost of development and at the same time decrease the market price for the final product. Now, taking on massive development projects can take years to complete. So with the long life cycle of your projects, how does this uncertain economic climate affect Daniels?
Scary, man. Just kidding. For sure, it's a very uncertain moment because, as we all know, the last 15, 18 years, the market has been like this in Toronto. It's been a rising market. It's been a strong market. It's been a very consistent market. Condominium prices have just continued to go up. Single-family home prices have continued to go up. The green belt that Ralph hates helped to raise prices as a result of a scarcity of land. So all of these factors are factors that did increase the value and the cost of housing. So there's a couple questions or things that I think you're asking. Affordability is one thing that we can come back to. But in terms of our business strategy and how we feel about where we're at right now, it's pretty simple. Our strategy is to be able to deliver housing at all levels of the market, in both ownership and rental, seniors and students. So for us, we have the ability to be really fast on our feet and to be extremely flexible in what we do. Way back in 1995, when Mike Harris killed the affordable housing programs in Ontario, the day after the election in 1995, we were building social housing, but it was all terminated the morning after the election. We had to rethink our business at that point in time.
Well, there is a reason. We were broke. We were broke. Okay.
We
so-
didn't believe that the termination of the affordable housing program the day after the election was actually common sense. We had a significant disagreement with the government. We sued them, and guess what? We won. So we'll talk about sort of common sense another time. But back to that. At that moment in time, we had to really rethink our business strategy, who we are as a company. We were building social housing, we were building market housing, but that really developed for us a trajectory where we had to expand what we did and how we thought about what we did. So that's when we began to explore seniors housing. That's when we, met every seniors operator in the country. Literally, we knocked on doors across the country, and every seniors operator we met, we actually were extremely disappointed. We couldn't believe the operating methodology. Seniors housing at that moment in time, 1996, 97, 98, it was really warehousing. It was not about experience. It was not about opportunity for older people. So at that moment, I wrote a piece called A Renaissance in Seniors Living. And we took that on the road until we found a company, a public company in Vancouver called Amica Mature Lifestyles, who said, this is how we're thinking too. We want to create places for our mums and dads where they want to live, where they want to move out of their single family home that they've been in, raising the kids. They want to actually take that next step because it's about life enhancement, not about a warehouse, not about just putting the parents away. So we entered a relationship with Amica, and we built 17 communities with them over the last 17 years or so. They were recently bought by the Teachers Pension Fund, and now we're...
I was on that board.
Yeah, exactly. So Baybridge is the company that bought Amica. They bought the brand. They paid an enormous premium in the public market to buy Amica. Why? Because Amica had a brand that was about wellness and vitality. That is what the brand that we help with Amica create, that older people want to move there and be there. So I'm simply saying that as an expression of a business plan, we are partners right now with Amica. It's now Baybridge. We're partners with another company called Chartwell. We have a deal because it's the right thing for them to do and for us to do. So all I'm saying in answer to your question, we do seniors housing with a couple different partners, but we're also building rental housing. Purpose-built rental housing is now something that is back in the milieu, in the development industry. And we have a partnership with Sun Life. We've built a building with them. We have a second building under construction in Regent Park with Sun Life. That actually is a really important exclamation mark. There was a moment in time when nobody would touch Regent Park with a 10-foot pole. Sun Life has now made a significant investment in Regent Park to build a market rental building. So we're partners in building rental buildings. We're also partners with a company called Crete, a real estate investment trust, Choice, another real estate investment trust, all of whom want to build rental buildings. So the market for condominiums, for sure, is a little dicey. The market for single-family homes in suburban areas has gotten so high that, in fact, people have stopped buying right now. The market is very soft out in the suburban areas. Are we worried? No. I'm buying actually today a 20-acre site in Brampton by the Mount Pleasant GO station because it's a transit node. There will be demand for people who want to live there. We're going to build the most affordable housing on the market in that location, which brings me to another sort of initiative that we've had as part of our overall business strategy. It's a division of ours called First Home. So I don't know if you've read on our website about First Home, but First Home is crazy. First Home, we rolled up our sleeves 17 years ago and we said, how do we build the most affordable homes on the market? What do we have to do? What's the rationale? What's the methodology? And so our construction guys got involved, the marketing guys got involved, and all our teams came together, and we developed a strategy that, in fact, we have now consistently built the most affordable homes on the market. And every time we build a first home community, people line up for weeks, up to 3 weeks in advance, because they know it's going to be the most affordable home on the market. On our website, if you want to take 8 minutes or so, there's this unbelievably cool video that sort of chronicles the life of a first home community and leading up to the launch and sale day, which is one of the most emotional days for people who have done their sweat equity by lining up for 2 weeks or 3 weeks to be able to have an opportunity to buy. There's so much joy in that, and there's a lot of disappointment because we can't build enough homes to come anywhere near satisfying the market. So short answer to your question, we're not worried about the market in the GTA. There's enormous immigration and an ongoing basis. 100,000 people a year are going to come to Toronto. We're going to find homes, build homes, whether it's rental, condominium, whether it's student housing. We have a partnership with the University of Toronto to build student housing. We're looking at a partnership with Ryerson to build student housing as a by-the-by. We've been talking to Mohammed about that recently. And so we have a lot of confidence in this marketplace. We think it's totally strong and is going to grow and continue to grow for decades.
Hi, Mitchell.
Hey.
So my question is actually about the housing stock and the future housing stock of the city. As a property developer, you're responsible for creating the housing stock for the next 100 to 200 years. It's also a fact that thriving communities enable people from all stages of life to live in the same area. Yet, one-bedroom condos are the easiest to sell, and a recent Toronto Star report plays this out by finding that only 38% of new downtown housing stock has more than one bedroom. When you're designing a development, particularly in downtown, which is where I live and where I'd like to live for a long period of time, how do you balance the needs of the city and the surrounding community with the quick return on investment? And why isn't your company and other developers in the downtown core building more multi-room units?
We have for many, many years now been incorporating a lot of 3-bedroom units. It's tough because the end price is that much higher. What I've been telling and working with my team to do is to look at the overall pro forma and balance it. So yes, we need to have more family housing downtown. There's no question about it. You are right. In order to have a healthy, vibrant city, we need to have kids downtown, we need to have the playgrounds, we need to have the schools, and we need to build the housing that is going to be able to address a growing population of families downtown. So we're building 3-bedroom units. I think it's now 10 to 15% of all of our buildings are now 3-bedroom. We're actually now, I mentioned the Sun Life building, the rental building, we're building 4-bedroom rental units in that building because we agree with you, we have to be building for tomorrow. And tomorrow we want to have families living downtown. Now, is it a requirement of the city? No. Should it be? Yes. I think there should be. As all a part of, what are we building here in Toronto? There are so many different things that need to be taken into consideration. I mentioned earlier inclusionary zoning. How do we ensure that there's going to be affordable housing downtown? How do we ensure there's going to be affordable family housing downtown? And that's done by regulation. I mean, developers don't like regulation. The auto industry didn't like regulation when emission controls were put on cars back in whenever it was, the 70s. But now everybody understands we need to have emission controls on cars in order for us to breathe. In order to have a healthy city, we need to have regulations that's going to require us to have family units and to have affordable family units. So inclusionary zoning is certainly one way to do it that has a certain requirement for size, bedroom count. The other thing that is happening now, which is very, very good, exciting, progressive, is both the city and the province have come to a place that we've been promoting now for decades, which is what we refer to as the intentional disposition of public land. What does that mean? It used to be in the past, up until very recently, the city or the province would sell land and they'd simply say, who's going to pay us the most money for the land? No strings attached, no requirements, boom, sell the land, take the money, where does it go? But now the city has decided, and the province as well, that they're going to require that when they declare a piece of land surplus, they're going to say that 30% of the density built on that land has to be affordable, with actual requirements as to the level of affordability built in. So we're about to bid on 2 sites in the West Donlands. Amazing pieces of land, 4 acres each, right beside the Distillery District and Canary District. And the province has said, number one, these lands must be built as rental, and number two, 30% of the density has to be affordable. So we're partnering on that bid, which is going to go in next Thursday, with the YMCA, with Covenant House, and Community Living Toronto, all of whom are going to have units within that building that are going to be deeply affordable for people who otherwise would have no opportunity to be able to live in affordable housing in the city. So the province has a role to play, the city has a role to play. The feds have yet to step into this and say, we have surplus public land as well. We're hoping we'll get them there, because if all three levels of government are being very intentional about the disposition of land, we can create affordable housing and we can create family housing that's also affordable.
Earlier this year, the Ontario provincial government implemented 16 measures to curb escalating prices in Toronto's housing market. One of those related to rent control expansion. Now, while this is beneficial to current tenants, it may reduce future rental opportunities by discouraging development of new apartment units. Additionally, more than 1,000 planned purpose-built rental units have instead been converted to condos, and a recent FRPO member survey found that 20,000 of 28,000 planned rental units are under review. Do you think the 5-year, $125 million rebate fund Premier Wynne has put in place to encourage development is enough to offset the rent control measures? How do you predict the market will be affected overall in the future?
Okay, first of all, I think those FRPO numbers, in terms of the number of people that are not going to build rental housing, are full of doo-doo. We're building rental housing. I mentioned all of the partners we're building rental housing with. And yes, now the Wynne government has done this thing with rent control. And yes, it absolutely protects tenants. But what we know and how we build a pro forma for a rental building is not expecting that we're going to be able to raise the rent by 3%, 5%, or 7% a year. That is never the business plan on building a rental building.
Why not?
The business plan is being able to rent at the cost of living or the rent tribunal. The Tenant Protection Act has a 1.5 or 0.8. Every year it's different, but it's a very low increase that you can increase. That's what the legislation is doing. You cannot increase more than that. So that's fine. We would never build a pro forma expecting that we're going to have increases any greater than that anyway. So it either works or it doesn't work on the basis of that. What we do expect, however, because what happens in rental buildings, there is turnover. People move out. When people move out, we can charge market rent. So if there's attrition of 10% a year or 15% a year, those float to market, whatever market is. So that's the basis upon which we think about our pro formas, is how much turnover is there going to be? How much is the overall market going to go up? And we're very conservative. We say, okay, the market will go up 2% a year. So if we have 10% turnover, we're going to be able to raise the rent by 2%. And the rest of the units, we're going to raise the rent only by whatever it is that the Tenant Protection Act will allow that year. So we've done the math. Our partners have done the math. Yes, there is one company that has said we're not, publicly have come out and said we're converting to condo. They were actually never planning to do those as rental anyway. And we know because we talked to them about it, and it was unfortunate. It's politics. It's saying, Wynne government, you did the bad thing. We're not going to get out of it. We're not going to build rental housing. But look around. There's going to be thousands of rental housing units that are going to be built by developers like us and others over the next 10 years, without any doubt. What she has done is create some stability, some certainty. We know what we're going to be able to rent, increase our rents by. And certainty and stability is what it counts most in terms of that business.
Hi, Mitchell. So Parkdale was once a prominent neighborhood in Toronto. In fact, many mansions and Victorians that date back to the 19th century are still in existence in some form. However, the composition of the neighborhood changed with the construction of the Gardiner Expressway in the 1950s, which created a barrier between the neighborhood and Lake Ontario. Parkdale now has a higher than average amount of rental housing and consists of a higher proportion of low-income and newcomer families. So I know that your organization is currently leading the Regent Park Revitalization Project, which is focused on making Regent Park a desirable place to work, live, and play. The Parkdale neighborhood is quite similar to Regent Park, and so my question to you is this. Have you ever considered investing in a Parkdale revitalization?
We would love to invest in a Parkdale revitalization. We've looked at opportunities, but here's the difference. Big difference between Parkdale and Regent Park. Regent Park was and is, to a great extent still, 69 acres that was owned by the City of Toronto. So one land owner on 69 acres is hugely unusual. There are very few opportunities where there's one single landlord, owner. So that's what made Regent Park possible. It was originally owned by the federal government back in the 40s when Regent Park was built as the Garden City. The feds downloaded it to the province in 1984. Province downloaded it to the city. But it's one ownership. City of Toronto owned that 69 acres. So they could say, let's make a plan. Let's determine how we're going to revitalize that. We've looked at Parkdale, and there's no land assembly. There's no major pieces of land that are owned by an individual landlord or a public agency. We've actually gone to the city about the library and said, this is an amazing library on Queen Street, and there's a parking lot around it, and there's some opportunity for development beside it. We've said, you've got to put that out to proposal call, and you've got to do it with what we referred to earlier as intentionality. Because here's this little library on this great piece of land in Parkdale. Use that as a catalyst for revitalization. Put it out to tender, but require that 30% of the units be affordable and that the library gets replaced. So that's what we've suggested to the local councillor, and there is a process that's now underway.
Who's the local councillor?
Leighton.
Oh, good luck. Mike
Sorry,
Leighton
no,
here.
no, excuse me.
Good luck.
Gord Perks. Even more good luck.
Even worse.
Yeah, sorry.
You get Stephanie on the file there.
Yeah. So that's the difference. I mean, it really is different when there isn't a land assembly. We'd love to work in Parkdale because, again, it is exactly what you said. It's a neighborhood with huge tradition in the city, and it just takes finding a piece of land that can be a catalyst for that revitalization. If you find one, call me.
According to Statistics Canada, approximately 12% of Canadians aged 15 or over have reported having at least one disability, which corresponds to 3 million people. 66% of those reported that they have mobility disabilities. Daniels Corporation recently announced that they had been working to address accessibility in condo units and will introduce a program called the Designed program. This will help purchasers with mobility devices. Given the statistics above, why is Daniels shifting their business this way right now? Why now, and why has this not been addressed before, as there are many Canadians with accessibility issues that also require affordable housing? Thank you.
Why now? Well, you're right. 10 years ago would have been better, 15 years ago would have been even better. But recently, our team began to get a lot of feedback about the buildings that we were building. And much of what happens in life happens as a result of who you get to know, who you bump into, who you become friends with. So one of our team members, who happens to be my son, has a friend who fell off a bicycle a number of years ago and became a paraplegic. A real athlete, an amazing young man, who all of a sudden couldn't walk and was wheelchair bound. And Jake, my son, took his friend on a tour of one of our condominiums, and guess what? There are many, many rooms within that building that we built that he couldn't get into because we didn't have the automatic door openers into every amenity space, because the suite that Jake lived in was not at all accessible. The bathroom was inaccessible. The balcony was inaccessible. So you have a balcony, but someone in a wheelchair can't get over the hump to get out onto the balcony. So personal experience, Jake brought back from that and said, like, we're idiots. The building code requires that a certain percentage of units within a building, and I think it's 10%, be built to the building code standard for accessibility. And we were doing that. And all builders are doing that because you have to. That's the building code. But the reality is, for someone in a wheelchair who's mobility challenged, it don't work. So Jake came back and said, we have to find a way to do better. We have to find a way, excuse me, where my friend Luke can actually come into my home and be able to go to the bathroom, or can get out onto the balcony, or we can take him down to the basketball court or any of the other amenities in the building, and it's easy because the door widths are proper, because there's a automatic door opener on every single door. So Jake said, let's create a program. It's called Accessible Design, ADP, the Accessible Design Program. And we launched it about a month ago in 2 communities, one in Mississauga and one in Regent Park. And we said 15% of all the units that we're going to build in the future will be designed to this standard. So it's well beyond the building code, both in the number of units, but in how we're going to be adapting our buildings. The key thing is it's not really adapting, because when you do it from scratch, while you're pouring the concrete, you pour a little indentation between your unit and the balcony so that the door goes in the track and the track isn't above, so that somebody can actually wheel out onto the balcony. You create your bathroom so that you can wheel into a shower. You create turning radiuses that are greater than the building code requirements. So are we late to this party? I mean, it's not a party. It's something that we should have been done and doing years ago. It's something that we're hoping the entire industry will begin to follow. And ideally, the building code, I mean, we do these things because we want to demonstrate, one, it can be done, and it can be done if you do it with forethought without adding a lot of cost to your building, because you're just building it into your spec. The guys pouring the concrete will pour the concrete the way the drawings tell you to. So it doesn't cost a lot if you're doing it up front. It costs a bundle to try to retrofit or adapt it later. So we're doing this now, and we hope that in the next couple of years, the next review of the building code will actually incorporate these design standards that we have included in our accessible design program.
Okay, thank you, Mitchell. This is my question. According to Ontario's 5-year Climate Change Action Plan, 2016-2020, and the energy, okay, it says, and the energy they consume. Buildings and the energy they consume account for almost 25% of Ontario's total greenhouse gas emission. Between 1990 and 2012, building sector emissions per square meter improved significantly. However, its total emissions still rose due to population, economic, and building floor space growth. Ontario's building sector presents a particular challenge because many existing buildings were built at a time when energy efficiency was less of a priority and climate change was not considered. These buildings rely mainly on fossil fuels for heating. My question is, what is the Daniels Corporation doing to reduce greenhouse gas emission in your existing and new buildings? And secondly, do you agree that the cap and trade program is an effective initiative to reduce greenhouse gas emission? And if not, what other policy initiatives can you suggest to Premier Kathleen Wynne to help her achieve her emission reduction goals, especially in relation to emissions from buildings?
Thank you. So I don't know a lot about cap and trade. I do believe it is the right approach. I mean, we're not a big company that emits. I mean, we build buildings. We're not a big producer of the emissions that we could be trading in the market of cap and trade, but I do believe it's an approach that is working. Now, as it relates to our buildings, you know, I mentioned earlier about LEED, so leadership in environmental sustainability. It's a design standard. It's the most recent design standard, and we are building and have been building LEED buildings for years. Now, recently, and this is great, this is all about the city catching up to the industry in this case, the city's introduced a new standard called the Tier 2 Environmental Standard, which pretty much mirrors LEED in terms of how we're going to build the envelope of our building to achieve better than the National Building Code in terms of the energy standard. So we've now taken on this Tier 2 standard as the way that we're going to be building all of our buildings. We're doing all Tier 2. The city is creating an incentive for builders to do Tier 2. Not all the developers are doing it, but if you build to the Tier 2 standard, you'll get a rebate in your development charges. Brilliant. So the city's saying, we want our city to actually make a difference in terms of how we are going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, how we're going to reduce our carbon footprint. So we're all aboard to do that and to build to the Tier 2 standard. So we're doing it, we're going to continue to do it, we're going to continue to talk to others in our industry about upping the game. Again, it's about regulation. Without regulation, builders would build buildings that have no proximity to the national sort of standard with respect to carbon emissions or energy and heat loss in our buildings. So we need those regulations in order to combat the climate change that we all know and feel and scientists around the world are saying is real. So we have a small role to play, but we're building buildings that for sure are better than the building code. The building code needs to continue to come up. The City of Toronto is playing a leadership role, and we applaud them for that.
On behalf of Ryerson, thank you very much.
That was great.